All right, so I'm going to start this essay here. Jackie Robinson and Hank Greenberg, and I want to set the stage through what happens with Greenberg. It's this level of unassuming heroism that precedes and is actually the movement from which a lot of what happens with Jackie Robinson occurs. So Greenberg becomes a massive star in baseball in the early to mid 30s, and this is all occurring during the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany. And what happens with Greenberg being the only Jewish American baseball player is that the anti-Semitic undercurrent of the fans, other players, the nation of the United States, including Henry Ford in Detroit, right? Detroit being one of the biggest anti-Semitic cities at the time. This current, this force is very powerful and very strong. And what happens with Greenberg, which is actually so deeply radical, is I mentioned this in the other essay. He said at one point it felt like every home run I was hitting it against Hitler. He's standing on this political, cultural, national stage of baseball at the height of its popularity as one of the game's greatest players, right? Multiple MVPs, World Series titles. Um, he has one of the best OPSs of all time, RBIs. If he had been in the game the whole time without actually taking all of the wartime that he took, actually enlisting and being in the war, his stats would probably be pretty massive. But during this period of time, he is actually standing not only domestically as an example of um, Jewish political power, for lack of a better word, because of his skill and ability and his character on the baseball field. He was standing up and saying, "I'm not going to tolerate this bad behavior from people who were jeering him or attacking him," as well as performing these incredible feats on the baseball field. Um, he's standing up as a representative not only of the Jewish American community, but the global Jewish community. He is being tracked all over the world by Jewish people during this period of time because the anti-Jewish sentiment is so high, and he is standing really alone, with the exception of Einstein, as a counterbalance to this narrative. And with Einstein, right, there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of intelligence, and it's something that not very many people can understand. They can understand it's important, but they don't know why. But you look at the baseball field and you look at the play and ability of Hank Greenberg, many people can understand that because it's relatable, it's direct, it's immediate, it's not abstract, it's material, it's sweat, dirt, it's grit, right? And so the working class quality of Greenberg, right? His parents were they owned, it was like a cloth cleaning or cloth straining facility in New York, and they were immigrants from Romania, I believe, Romanian Jews. He is actually standing up in front of the world on a global stage. And so I want to compare this to Jackie Robinson. What Jackie Robinson does in terms of the civil rights movement in the United States is massive. But looking at this situation with Greenberg, and it's so under-recognized and it's not spoken about nearly enough, is that he himself is standing on the international stage as a representative of the Jewish people in the midst of one of the most difficult and brutal periods of time for Jewish people in history. This period of time of Nazi Germany and World War II and the Holocaust, right? Um, there's really not a strong enough way to sum this up because you're looking at this was not something that he intended. He said it himself. He said, I I don't particularly associate with Jewishness, right? Especially early on in his career. I think he was born in a family of Orthodox Jews, and he wasn't particularly religious, but he was brought into, right. He was almost called or summoned into this act of deeply human heroism by way of the course of history, right? The course of history called him into this relationship as the only Jewish American player during this period of time that this larger transpersonal anti-Jewish sentiment is reaching a utter peak of insanity and chaos and madness, right? So you look at this as an undercurrent of American history and human history, and this is one of the greatest kind of unsung stories of human heroism. And you look at his contribution later on, 10 years later, with Jackie Robinson, and actively supporting Jackie and talking to him about his situation, forming a bridge, right, between generations. One of the greatest baseball players of all time, now retired, is talking to Jackie Robinson about integrating baseball. The situations are so deeply intertwined in terms of what both of them face, but the differences are also very abundantly clear. There could not have been a stranger and more brutal time for Hank Greenberg to be the only Jewish person on the baseball field. To face what he faced, and to face it with the dignity and character and courage that he faced it with, is very profound. So I'm just going to pull up a couple of things here. There was no movement behind Greenberg, right? This wasn't intended. This wasn't like an integration of baseball. This wasn't like a movement that was breaking a boundary that was existent within the current cultural scope or domestic sphere. There were Jewish barnstorming teams, actually, like the House of David, that would play black barnstorming teams very early on in the 20th century. But this instance, it's such a fascinating example of heroism, and such a deep example of heroism and self-overcoming, precisely because it wasn't intended. And this was not something that Greenberg actively looked for or embraced or anything like that. It was something that he wanted to play baseball. And he did not see himself as particularly Jewish, but the cultural circumstances brought him into a position of not only embracing, but channeling deeper into his Jewishness, right? And becoming more and more of a figure that he was not just standing for himself on the baseball field. He was standing for Jewish people around the world, because they were witnessing this, right? This was reported on everywhere in all of these Jewish communities, as well as domestically in a very large scale, because of just how powerful he was on the baseball field. This was reported, and this was a way of holding up to the light and saying these narratives that are being told against Jewish people cannot be, and actually are not true. Look at what Hank Greenberg is doing, right? So that's a very powerful thing. You have this massive anti-Semitic kind of scapegoating method of ethnic bigotry that's happening, and you have this baseball player who's playing. He's just there to play baseball, and he is just becoming better and better and better, and he is still remembered to this day as one of the absolute best baseball players of all time. It's not just about baseball. It's not just about America, and it's not even just about Jewishness anymore. It's about he's going against the entire tide of this madness and this hatred that is occurring at this period of time in history, that's reaching its utmost peak internationally, right? And he is standing really as the sole cultural figure that can be understood by the common person, right? Again, Einstein, there's a difference there, because this is a very, very profound and complex scientific knowledge that he's communicating. He also has a lot of humanistic texts and essays. He's also very political and cultural. But with Greenberg, there's no terms for what's happening, because it's such a whirlpool of dramatic, quickly rising energy. The anti-Semitism was always there, but it was reaching a fervor that catalyzed and culminated and was an integral part of this massive global war. So Greenberg, as the son of these Romanian immigrants who own this cloth company in Brooklyn, right, in New York City, is becoming one of the best baseball players of all time in Detroit, one of the most anti-Semitic cities, with Henry Ford putting out very anti-Semitic texts and information. He's doing all of this as this continues to blow up, and he keeps going. He keeps doing it. It's being documented everywhere. People are hearing about it everywhere, and it's a way of reasserting humanity. It's a way of pointing back to humanity. in the midst of this outcry against Jewishness globally. These international people who know nothing about baseball are now following Hank Greenberg in his achievements on the baseball field in America, because he is that example, right? He is that counter narrative. That level of visibility and dignity and grace that he was able to continually maintain and become better and better and better is almost unfathomable, because he's 1938, he's chasing Babe Ruth's home run record. That's Kristallnacht unfolding in Germany, Hitler in every newspaper, Jewish refugees are being turned away from American shores, anti-Semitism is mainstream, endorsed by celebrities, politicians, and newspapers. He's being harassed in the stands constantly. Sports writers are talking about him. Players on his own team are against him. One of the players that he played with said he thought that Jewish people had horns. He was like, I can't believe that you're Jewish. This is the American cultural stage, right? It does not get any bigger than this in the 1930s and 1940s. Baseball is everything. And while all of this is going on, he hits 58 home runs. He almost breaks Babe Ruth's record. He is just that good, consistently that good. And his character, the way he plays the game, and the way he stands up not only for himself but for the entirety of the Jewish people, because he's being called. This is not an orchestration. This was not something that was planned. This was the current and the flow of history, and he is called into this deeper relationship. It's he worked harder than anyone. Always principled, quietly kind. Jackie Robinson later said, "Class tells. It sticks out all over Mr. Greenberg. Known as a man of few words, but great weight." Here you go. In Polish ghettos, in Hungarian villages, and in French newspapers, Jews followed the tales of a giant Jew playing America's great game. In British Palestine, Greenberg was discussed as a symbol of what Jews could become, a powerful counter-image to the European narrative of weakness. Refugee communities, he was mentioned. His name resounded. Greenberg. This is the idea, right? This is a symbol for, not only as a counter narrative, but a symbol for hope, right? A symbol for Greenberg is accomplishing this during this time where our entire international community, right, this entire ethnicity, is being systematically attacked, exterminated, right? This is so much of what heroism is, right? And it's unexpected, and it comes from unexpected and strange places. Unexpected places. Jewish immigrants in the pogroms. Families watching Hitler's rise on the radio. Children ashamed of their last names, right? Hank Greenberg is visible on this national stage, which becomes an international and global stage. And he's undeniable. He's present, and he's playing baseball with a physical force and presence that's undeniable. This is something that you can't explain away an idea. This is a physical, embodied presence of someone who is overcoming not only himself, but overcoming the world. And in doing so, he stands for hundreds of thousands of people. Every Jewish newspaper covered his feats. Jewish boys knew his batting average. Rabbis mentioned him from the pulpit during the high holidays. Families argued over whether he should have played on Yom Kippur or not, but everyone knew why it mattered. Proof on this stage, right? In a time where Jewish people were having to hide under the floorboards of uh, French houses, Polish houses, hide in the attics, right? He is proof that you do not have to hide on a public stage. That is just, it is incredibly powerful. And you wonder why it's not spoken about enough. And I think a lot of this is because baseball can be dismissed. It's often dismissed in the cultural forum as it's just a sport, right? But this is so much more than a sport because of the way it's structured and because of what it means to an entire civilization. It's a stage upon which our greatest hopes, dreams, aspirations, our greatest virtues, our greatest humanity is expressed. This was not, he, in the middle of the greatest portion of his career, he's drafted into the Army before Pearl Harbor, serves longer than any major league player, nearly any major league player, over 4 years of peak playing time. Refused to play on Yom Kippur in 1934 when Hitler had just risen to power. One of the greatest hitters of all time. This is a world historical event. This is a world historical person and figure. A sign of dignity, hope, power, and presence in a world bent on erasure of Judaism and Jewish people. This was never a story. This was never a myth. It was a historical reality that happened in real time. There's no arc, right? This is not, there's nothing fancy or deliberate or even narrative about this. To be able to hold that is incredibly powerful. And it's almost, it's just like everything about what baseball is about, what is possible within baseball. Might be yeah, in the notes, might be the biggest hero in American baseball history and one of the most important heroes in American history. This is what's so important about remembering these stories and giving them, right, the dignity and the presence and speaking the truth of them because they happen in their history. But to give them the presence and meaning and dignity and to speak the truth of them is to consecrate history, right? To consecrate history and to give it its fullness and to honor these people. That's what this project is about. To honor these people. Just one of the most powerful figures in baseball and American history for what he did, for what he was able to do. And this is someone who just wanted to play baseball, but he was called. He was called into a deeper relationship. And that's almost like the essence of spirituality. You're called, and he answered the call. And he ends up after in all of this, he ends up going into the war. He's drafted and then he leaves and he actually enters back into the war of his own volition with the Air Force. And he is in campaigns. He's in combat. I'm forgetting which combat zones he was in. Yep. Stationed in China, Burma, India theater. Major logistics and operations region. Captain and physical training officer for bomber groups. Lost 5 peak seasons, age 30 to 34, when he was still at the top of his game. And he comes back, hits a home run in his first game. His final at bat with the Tigers in 1945, he hit a grand slam to win the pennant. And I think it was raining that day, too. You don't, like, the full bodied aspect of this type of heroism, this quiet, reserved, called into this relationship that is, it's not only about him and his immediate situation, right? Having to endure this moment in time. He's carrying this symbolic weight of being the only Jew on the international stage at the level of comprehension of the average everyday person performing this kind of feat. And you can compare it a lot to Einstein. This is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Einstein's feats are intellectual, they're cosmological. For Hank Greenberg, his feats are physical, they're existential, they're moral. Einstein's feats are also moral. This gives people hope. It gives people the ability to say, maybe this is not all lost on me, because here's someone who is like me, who is doing this, who is standing up for us in a time when no one else is. And this is someone who this was not planned. Called. And to honor him is to honor that entire history. And it's to honor that historical moment. And it's to honor the impact of something that just one person can do by standing up for what's right. And by pursuing and honing his craft, honing his discipline, showing up. And he becomes this example for an entire group of people during their greatest persecution in the 20th century. He stands there, and he does this work through himself. And thus it becomes this transpersonal moment of power and dignity and courage. People around, again, right, Jewish people around the world, this is not just domestic. They're following him. Even if they know nothing about baseball, they start to learn about baseball, and they start to hear about him. They understand there is a Jewish person that is doing these things, right? These powerful things, these self-overcomings. And this is through him. This is through his skill in baseball. It's Ramana Maharshi, great quote from Ramana Maharshi. Your own self-realization is the greatest gift you can give to the world. And Hank Greenberg is just an example of that. It's a spiritual example. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll catch you on the next one.